Nicholas, are you here? Sorry, Nicholas, are you here? Nikolai.
I'm here. Hello.
Yes, you're here. Okay, great. So I think the floor is yours. So you will lead this second session since we don't have a break.
So we start immediately.
This is what I'm being told. Yes, by Andrea. I think everyone feels the need for at least 1 minute break. But well.
Okay, so let's start then. Welcome to the second part. I'm the moderator invited by the organizers, the ELF, and I would like to thank them. A few words about the event and about me. Very short. This event, as you know, those of you who were here in the first part, you know that this is an event that is planned as a series, and it will end up in a publication that will stress mainly on the rule of law and more specifically on the conclusions that we can make from the experience of Bulgaria and Romania, especially the CVM mechanisms, the application, and what are the lessons that we've been taught. More about you can find on the website. We'll post the link later. A few words about me and the organization I'm part of, and then we'll move on to the rules and the participants. My name is Nikolai Staikov, investigative journalist, one of the founders of the Anti-Corruption Fund. This is a relatively new organization. We started in 2017, and as of today, we see a lot of our publications being used, mostly work of my colleagues from the legal team, being used in the CVM reports, especially the last one. And we also do investigations. The last ones that we can mention are mainly on corruption issues within the specialized prosecution of Bulgaria, and they've been widely quoted and mentioned. More about our organization you can find on the website acf.bg. So before giving the floor, a few remarks on your organizational part. The house rules are the following. This is a public discussion. So it will be recorded and then posted on the website. Please write your full name so that we know whom we are talking to or who is going to raise questions. If you have any questions, please raise hand or write it. If you prefer, write it in the chat so that we can give it, so that we can, so that we know. And also, I've already said that this is a public session, so it can be quoted by journalists or by citizens or anyone who is joining this link. Also on the organizational part, Mrs. Ramona Strugariu will join us in about 15-20 minutes because she is in an important Libe committee meeting first. But we have been ensured that she will join us. So I will present each speaker in the order that you already have, and we'll give them the floor for a few minutes. Then we'll have the floor to open questions, and will be the open part. Approximate duration of this event, of this panel, is about 1 hour. So let's move without wasting any time. Let's move to the first speaker. It's from my home country, Bulgaria. Mrs. Zinaida Zlatanova is she's here, and a few words to present her. Mrs. Zlatanova, Master in Law from the Sofia University. She has held several public positions, and to mention especially her position as Deputy Prime Minister for European funds and Minister of Justice a few years ago. And she is working now in the NGO sector as an analyst. So, Mrs. Zlatanova, my pleasure to give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Staikov. Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Because I had several problems with my internet. That's why I'm asking if everybody's hearing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I'm very thankful to ELF that they organized such a project. I think it's very timely and it's very important to talk about these issues, about the rule of law, even in a broader format. I also can confirm for our participants who are not from Bulgaria that indeed our moderator, Mr. Staikov, is a part, maybe even the driving force behind this organization, who had outstanding results in investigative journalism in the recent years. Some of them were watched by more than 1 million, if I'm not mistaken, people in Bulgaria. So they made sure that everybody knows what's wrong with certain institutions, with certain people in there, and how to raise the awareness of that. So indeed, it's a very good panel. So straight on the agenda, on the question. I see myself maybe as a sort of a veteran in the CVM issues, because I was deputy chief negotiator with the EU when the mechanism was established in the accession treaties of Bulgaria and Romania back in 2004, 2005. I was working for the Bulgarian government. Then I worked for the European Commission for almost 6 years. Then I worked again for the Bulgarian government, and now I am working for the NGO sector. So I have seen this from all possible angles, and I'm not very proud of that, my sort of veteran position, so to say, because back in 2005, we thought it will be over in 3 years. And I think that was also what the Commission believed and what member states believed, because they only imposed the safeguard clauses for 3 years after accession. However, that didn't happen. But I will play sort of a institutional advocate for why I think the CVM was very useful. First of all, and foremost, it's the fact that in 2007, Bulgaria and Romania became a part of EU. And that was extremely important, because without being a part of the EU, without joining the Union in 2007, we might have been in a situation of other countries near us or not that near, that are struggling with issues much more serious than we are. Okay, Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, or Moldova, or whatever. So joining the EU was the most important thing for geopolitical, for economic, for social, for purely internal political reasons, in order to conclude the transition. Among other achievements I can mention, it's a series of judicial reform that were performed, the result of which was at least that the Bulgarian judicial process, civil process, penal, administrative, became much more quick than it used to be before accession, and that's something everybody knows. Second very important achievement of the CVM is that the CVM prevented extreme rule of law violations in the country. It had a huge preventive role. like in other countries like Hungary, Poland, systemic violations of the rule of law. So due to the very vigilant monitoring, they were prevented. And it's very interesting to see back in 2005-06, if you take the media freedom, for example, the rankings, I can tell you that Hungary, I just checked yesterday, Hungary was on the 7th place in the world, way before France and Germany in media freedom. Now we know what is the situation. Bulgaria was back in 2005-07 on the 42nd place or something like that. Now Bulgaria is on the 112th place. So what I'm trying to say is that to prevent very dramatic rule of law failings was one of the crucial achievements of the CVM. It is not to neglect. It is very important. While other member states who were considered much more stable democracies at the time of their accession to the EU showed a very, very bad shortcomings in the rule of law area. So another very important achievement, I think, of the CVM is the very big approval it brought to the European institutions as such among the Bulgarian population, because the mechanism was and still is with a very high approval among the Bulgarian population. We had years when the approval was over 90%, measured by Eurobarometer. So it's completely contributing to the good image of the EU in the country. Another very positive thing is that through the CVM, the European Commission developed a very thorough knowledge of Bulgarian issues, of the shortcomings of the judicial system, of the anti-corruption framework, and it is really something that still will be developed for other countries since we have the new rule of law mechanism for all the 27 member states. So among the lessons that are learned, and I see these learned lessons, it's my very important point too, I see these lessons learned in the new rule of law set of instruments we have now. Most important of which are the annual rule of law report for all member states. On the second place, it's the new regulation on the general conditionality to safeguard the EU budget. And on the third place, in institutional terms, it's the EPPO. So these three instruments, together with the others that are supporting them, are a very good framework we already have since built since 2014, but sort of finished last year to combat for the rule of law, to sustain the rule of law throughout the Union. And I see in all those new instruments the lessons the Commission learned from, also from the CVM, not only, but also from the CVM. I don't know how much time I have, Nikolai, more.
Maybe a minute more, and then we will ask for one comment on my question.
Yes, so let's hope that now with all this new set of instruments, we'll have maybe, if not a different result, again, not deteriorating of the situation. Why I'm saying deteriorating? Because after all these 14 years of monitoring over Bulgaria, we ended up last year with a prosecutor general who basically on the national television challenged the separation of powers and their independence. So as Daniel asked earlier on the closure of the last session, how could that happen? But my answer is, it is not the European Commission to blame. No, it is not. So we don't have to put it on the European Commission or European institutions. We have to look internally what is happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Zlatanova. I am allowed to ask a very quick question, or rather some comments. for a minute or two. So can I ask you for a quick comment on the main criticism towards the CVM mechanisms and the CVM reports, that they are biased, politically biased, and that's been obvious. Do you agree, disagree? What do you think?
Thank you very much. It's a very widespread perception, especially in Bulgaria. I don't know about Romania. However, I have seen how these reports are prepared. I have, as I said, I have watched the process since the beginning, even before Bulgaria was an EU member state. And I can tell you that the European Commission, who was, by the way, the only one institution involved in that, left alone to deal with that. Now the situation is different because other institutions, the Council and Parliament, are also involved in the new set of instruments. But what concerns the European Commission, I'm sure that it did everything to be supportive in order to improve the situation and to move forward. And if that has been seen as a political bias, maybe it was a communication problem. But I don't think that it was existing during these years, because we all know who live in Bulgaria that the situation was exactly as the Commission explained it. Well, the mechanism's design is like that it doesn't envisage sanctions, it doesn't envisage any consequences beyond the political ones and beyond the bringing the problems to the table. So my short answer is no.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. We'll have time to remind you that we are open to any questions, so please raise a hand or write it down in the chat. Let's move on to a very impressive bio that Mr. Nedim Hodzic has, and a few words about him. He's a researcher with PhD and with PhD and LLM degrees from the university in Pisa and Harvard, and also consultant and legal and political advisors to many international organizations. I'm very interested, maybe not in this discussion, but in a different one, to hear about his experience and research on the judicial anti-corruption campaigns. But now I'm giving the floor to Mr. Nedim Hodzic.
Thank you, Mr. Stajko, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for the nice words. And I would like to thank the European Liberal Forum for having me here. So I think that the CVM started fairly simple, actually, as a sort of a legal exercise. And what we view now is actually a very naive way to tackle the issue of organization of government and organized crime and fight against corruption. And this naive presumption that it started with was that basically once you have the judicial branch of government independent and set up with the finest practices of the European countries, that this branch of government by itself will resolve most of the pressing issues that a country has concerning corruption and concerning organized crime. And indeed, one of the benchmarks used for assessing the progress in fight against corruption was precisely the number of prosecutions into high-level political corruption that will happen. So now, 14 years later, I think what we should know and what we should be aware of, especially the European institutions, is that it's not really important. It's very important, but it doesn't it neither tells you the story about how you fight corruption or how you prevent corruption, or it's not really the most efficient approach to fighting corruption. And then even when the progress happens, as it did in Romania to a certain extent, it's very difficult and very hard to measure it. So Ms. Latanova, for example, just raised the issue of the media freedom and how Hungary collapsed and went down from the 7th place. Yesterday, there was a presentation from Transparency International on their anti-corruption barometer. And for example, they found that the level of informal influence that the citizens use in Bulgaria and Romania last year is much lower than that used, for example, and needed by the citizens of Portugal and France. Now, typically, we say that Bulgaria and Romania are way more corrupt, or that the issue of corruption and informal networks and informal influence is way more important in those two countries than in Portugal and in France. And when I asked for a clarification of this matter, the response was, well, maybe in Romania and Bulgaria people bribe, whereas in these two countries they use informal influence. This doesn't seem a very convincing argument. And the reason for this is that we have significant problems in measuring corruption and significant problems in knowing what really works against corruption, and to what extent did these countries actually transform. So going back to the issue of separation of powers, what happened in Romania was that the anti-corruption campaign that started partially because the CVM mechanism was in place, and partially because both the civil society and some political leaders were to mobilize and were in position to mobilize support for anti-corruption measures, led to the questioning of separation of powers and to the attack on the independence of the Romanian judiciary, because many in Romania believed, or at least it was possible to mobilize the people, for a belief that what they are witnessing is a judicial revolution, that what they are witnessing is a dictatorship of the judges. These are not the views I subscribe to, but my understandings of the situation. So starting from late 2016, early 2017, we have had a series of decisions of the Romanian Constitutional Court that were to curb both the anti-corruption campaign by suspending the use of evidence collected by the Romanian intelligence agency SRI, the qualification and definition of the act of the misuses of public office, and the attempts to investigate the judiciary and try to hold judiciary accountable for the so-called judicial errors. This will later culminate in the decisions of the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, because the Romanian judges fought against this. And indeed, one of the publications on the state of judiciary in Romania is called 900 Days of Siege Against the Romanian Judiciary, which tells you really of the mentality of the judiciary itself, willing and being able to fight against the capture. On the other hand, what you see in Bulgaria is a sort of a different picture. Here, the issue of separation of powers matters because the perception is there is none, because the judiciary itself is captured and the judiciary itself is not efficient. Yet, I mean, if you would judge in accordance to the CVM reports, you would observe, for example, that for the years 2018 or 2017, they are more favorable towards Bulgaria than they are towards Romania, because obviously the authors of the CVM reports are, so to say, not very political. They try to prevent, and they try to, at least in some of their writings, they try to react not to the whole process, not to the whole sort of decade of corruption and anti-corruption, but rather to certain moments that are happening as happening tactically, that are happening within a shorter time frame, which is why these reports are not really good indicators of what's going on the ground. How much time do I have left?
1 more minute.
Yeah. So basically, in the end, this perhaps is not very positive and optimistic for the peoples of Bulgaria and Romania, but I mean, for the others, maybe for us also in the Western Balkans, when we look at the campaigns, we look, as one researcher, Bulgarian, I think, said, we don't look at the successes and failures. We look at the outcomes. And the outcomes are obviously, and partially due also to the rule of law crisis that engulfed Europe, is the overall importance of judicial independence, but also realization that judicial independence alone will not solve corruption. And also that if you have really a major judicial anti-corruption campaign, as you did in Romania in a certain period with Kövesi, you will have a situation where this project is contested and will be contested politically. And as we have seen also in Italy and Brazil, which have witnessed similar large-scale anti-corruption campaigns, this contestation, political contestation of these judicial issues is often, is unfortunately often very, very successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quick comment. Do you agree with the criticism? I will ask the same question, including to the next speaker. Do you agree with the criticism on political bias, especially on the narrative political part of the CVM reports throughout the years?
Well, partially yes, but the thing is, the prosecution of political corruption, to me, it's very difficult to have this thing going on and to have many people indicted without being political at a certain point. And I think that many of the prosecutors are people, you know, and they have not just political leanings, but they have political preferences, and they don't want a certain party to win if they are pretty certain that this party will gradually dismantle everything that has been achieved during the campaigns. And this has, you know, this has happened in Italy, this has happened in Brazil to a certain extent, and I do believe that there were legitimate fears in Romania from this happening.
Thank you. Moving on to the next speaker, Mrs. Ramona Strugariu. I hope she is now with us. And a few words about her. She has experience before joining the European Parliament as a member. In 2019, she was advisor before that, and studied law in Romania, European law. She has a degree in that, and also has worked in several civil society organizations. My pleasure to give the floor to Mrs. Ramona Strugariu.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. As well, I was carefully listening to my previous speakers, and I'm glad that we have an active debate, as a matter of fact, with a lot of participants. We are speaking about the history of CVM in the end for Romania and Bulgaria, this very complicated and strange mechanism, many times accused by many voices of being very political, with an opportunity for those two countries of being put in a corner every single time, and so on. Long history, but I would start by answering your question, and I will go then to my presentation, because I think it is relevant. Then the history of the CVM in Romania is relevant, as a matter of fact, for for what is happening today and for the way the justice system evolved. I don't believe that the CVM had a strong political impact, or it was used as a political weapon. I do not believe that. I think it was part of our process of joining the European Union, and this was clear from the beginning. I don't know whether it was understood from the beginning. Clearly, as a matter of fact, we do have a decision now in May of the European Court of Justice saying that this is not optional, and this has to be followed with the recommendations as such. It took us some time, at least for some of us, to understand, and it also took a decision of the ECJ to understand that this was not optional at all. But then at the same time, the very first CVM report that Romania had states that, and this, I think this was, well, not a mistake, but this is something that we should reconsider and reflect upon a lot, and I don't know if we did it a lot, that there's a need for irreversible and effective reforms, setting up sustainable structures for investigating corruption, enforcing the measures, and so on. And so many years later, one of the things that I could very openly state from the experience that we have in Romania and that I've seen in Romania is that there is no such thing as irreversible reforms. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. And that literally every single step that you take in performing and doing these reforms has to be doubled up by proper monitoring, by active civil society, by free press, by political will, by not only some, but all of these things happening, ideally happening at the same time. But then if some of those don't happen, at least some should have a power to react and some response to what reversibility means at a certain moment in time. And we have seen this in Bulgaria, and we have seen it in Romania as well. And we have seen that in Bulgaria, for example, things look fabulous on papers. And this is probably speaking about the technical side, why maybe Bulgaria was praised for reforms and implementing and taking steps and so on. But the realities and the political realities were slightly different, to gently say so, compared to what was on paper. Then moving back to Romania, I really want to quickly take you through the steps in this CVM report, a brief summary so that we understand what happened along the way. Now, 2007, the 4 major benchmarks: the judicial reform, the integrity agency that we successfully created, tackling high-level corruption, and the fight against corruption within local government. The last 2 with some progress achieved, but not satisfactory. Then, the first, from 2007 and 2009, we had really good results in these 4 fields. Then 2009, the first backtracking noted. The National Anti-Corruption Agency maintained a positive record, but many investigations were blocked by the parliament, meaning the political component of this the story. Basically meaning attempts by the parliament to restrict rights of the prosecution. Then we've had plenty of success and some astonishing cases sent to prosecution by the DNA. We've had excellent results of the National Integrity Agency. Everything seemed to work very, very well on this agenda. But then we had the 2012 moment with the 2013 as due date of appointing a new prosecutor general and the new DNA chief prosecutor. And then we had a political deal about it between the president and the prime minister in appointing high-level prosecutors. And this really contradicts this kind of political deal on appointing high-level prosecutors really contradicts all of those performance indicators, key points referring to the separation of powers, and so on. The 2014 CVM report heavily criticizes this deal, and then we're going down. There's a slope. 2017, we had 2 CVM reports, January and November. Short track record with positive results in 2016 technocratic government, but then the 2017 November report, first month of the socialist government, with the reform momentum completely lost, and risk of reopening very serious issues again significantly on the table. 2017 and 2019, the 2 years, attempts at modifying the criminal code, criminal procedure code, hundreds of people taking to the streets, measures and changes, legislative changes, heavily criticized by the Venice Commission, by Greco, recommendations of reconsidering all of these changes. July 2018, Venice Commission stating that it is asking basically the Romanian authorities to re-examine all drafts concerning justice laws, especially appointment and dismissal procedures for magistrates. Then lack of transparency, ROS procedures, serious concerns, and so on. More than 10 years, 12 years later, are we back to square or nearly back to square one or not? This is the question. And we still have plenty to do. I mean, apart from the fact that we're on a good agenda, we do have a good report now, a balanced one, let's say, noting some progress, but also mentioning that there are plenty of things to be done in order to have, again, a balanced picture of the separation of powers and of the progress achieved on this road for reforms that we started back then in 2007. Are we in this situation of either having anti-corruption gods and irreversible paths and full progress achieved? No. And we are probably not going to ever be in that situation. And I think, and I'm speaking here for Romania and Bulgaria as well, that this idea that we're expecting, if it is from the justice system or if it is from the political scenery or elsewhere, some savior, some messiah saving the justice system or saving the society as a whole or saving the free press, well, we're waiting for nothing. It's not going to happen. And even short, successful stories might end up, sadly, to some point, no matter how powerful that image is, how powerful that person is, or how much we tend to believe that this will solve all of our problems. Are we comfortable with the idea of being monitored forever through such a mechanism? No, obviously not. Because we are entering into a different logic with rule of law reports monitoring all of the member states. It is not as if there's no corruption in the rest of the member states and it's only these 2 states or a couple of more. And we do need this kind of reporting because we are looking at a whole framework where we have to be more brave about the treaties, about the decisions that we're taking at European level, at the mechanisms that we could trigger at European level so that we can act where we see serious deficiencies. But if we do not have true instruments in order to act at European level and not remain stuck in the Article 7 procedure forever, for example, or if we don't have very clear recommendations accompanying the rule of law report, which we don't have now, as clear as we had in the CVM, for example, and ways of checking whether those recommendations are implemented. And then if at national level, speaking about the nature of the report, we do not have the clear understanding that there should be no deal for the appointment of prosecutors, there should be no attempt from the political level to block investigations or to interfere in any way with the magistrates and with the prosecution and with the act of justice, basically.
There is some technical issue with Mrs. Strugarius. There was some technical issue, and also we are at the end of our time for the speaker's intervention.
Can you still hear me?
Now it's okay. I will skip my questions.
I'm concluding. Okay. I got caught by the story.
Please do.
Yeah. So if we do not have these, if we do not have all of these levels carefully implemented and ongoingly monitored, I think that we will more or less be stuck in the same picture. So yes, the anti-corruption fight is a day-by-day story, and it is an ongoing story, and it is an effort without perfect solution, to be clear about it, that each and every single decision maker and actor has to do every day. Thank you very much, and if there are questions, I'm looking forward to hearing them.
Thank you. I will skip my questions in order to move quicker to the public part, to the Q&As, and we have a question from the public, from Mr. Galev, but before that I will use my right as a moderator to ask a question. The speakers, it was mentioned in the first part that was not public, but let's do it here again. A week ago, about a week and a half ago, the United States imposed sanctions on 6 Bulgarian public officials and businessmen, and that's an unusual step that is actually shaking the country at the moment, including the prosecution, the anti-corruption institutions, the government, with all the measures. And so I will not go into any detail on the specific names, but I would like to know, what is your opinion of this as a method of intervention in the fight against corruption? What do you think, and does it give us any clues to this experiment? Because I still think this is an experiment on the fight against corruption in a specific country. What do you think about it? Does it give any direction of how the new mechanisms of imposing rule of law should work? Anyone from the speakers?
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Well, this is a sort of a novel tool that the Biden administration is using because it wants to sort of renew the pledge of the earlier US administrations that always wanted to take the fight against corruption to a global level. And the US is in a unique position to gather information on global corruption due to the existence of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which, to make a long story short, enables the US to gather information on many on many people involved in corruption, even when they are beyond the reach of the US Department of Justice. And then, obviously, with this incredible wealth of information, the US is in a unique position to distinguish and target individuals that it believes have been involved in corruption. So it definitely raises the possibility of the fight against corruption and on a global level, because it not only raises awareness, but it sort of creates reasonable doubt over some people, and then that may impact their standing in society, but also may point to the society in terms of whether it's on terms of the values and the political options that these people, the targeted individuals, stand for. Of course, much of this is then related to something that we cannot really control, which is the overall political standing of the US within a certain jurisdiction. The more sort of soft power, the better image the US has, the greater the chance of the sanctions producing the desired effect.
Thank you. It's an extremely interesting situation. I very much recommend you that you follow it, and I'm sure it will have very interesting conclusions in the future, but it's a little bit too early. So we have a question from Mr. Galev, who wants to raise the question how the CVM mechanisms or the still future rule of law mechanism could incorporate the findings and conclusions of other European institutions like the Venice Commission or the European Parliament, not only as additional sources of information, but as part of the conclusions. May I ask who wants to answer from the speakers? Mrs. Latanova, please unmute.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I just go back to what I said in my introductory, that now with the new set of instruments we have for safeguarding the rule of law, including the rule of law reports, including the rule of law framework, which is preparatory for Article 7 triggering and trying to prevent it actually. Now European Parliament has a more official role in all this debate, because, as I said, the CVM was completely left in the hands of the Commission, sort of played a bad cop, and then it was for the Parliament to pick up whether to intervene or not. It's very important that the European Parliament is on board. It's very important. It's a different institution. It's an independent institution. They're directly elected by the people. And I can tell you that when last year, for the first time, Bulgaria's case was debated in the European Parliament, the politicians here were really, really worried for the first time since years, let's say so. So I think that it's we cannot expect to produce one single report. On the contrary, the more institutions are involved, the better in the process, because there are more points of view. Thank you.
Thank you. And one question is, especially I would like to hear Mrs. Strugario's insights for the discussions. I was inspired by yesterday's Politico article about the blueprint of how the Commission should implement the regulation tying EU funds to rule of law, and there is a lot of criticism going on. Mrs. Strugario, do you have any insights to share about it?
Yes, the very brief answer to it, we should just move on and implement it. And we know that there is this, that we're now waiting for discussing the set of recommendation of the Commission. We also know that the position of the European Parliament is very straightforward, and that we had a resolution discussing about actually taking the Commission to court for this delay and this the intermediate steps that we do not need, because the conclusions of the Council do not have the force VU legislation. So I'm sure everybody is aware of these discussions, and the reality is that we should just move on and implement the legislation as it was adopted. And I would very briefly go back to the previous question about the US measures and about courageous measures in general, because I think that this is
very interesting. Thank you.
Yes, but because this is very a very interesting and rather unprecedented situation. But then the US has this Magnitsky framework since that, and has been using this Magnitsky framework since almost 10 years now, and this is more or less a picture that we are looking at. And it took the EU, as a matter of fact, a very, very long time to nearly get there. with like Magnitsky-like sanctions, and finally a framework and a more articulate way of moving forward. So what I believe is that we should probably learn more from that, and also use within the EU territory, if we are discussing about Bulgaria, how to enforce or actually or use or create this type of mechanisms, and make sure that they are efficient if we want to have results as well. So I would not necessarily interpret it as interference, but as I would interpret that as a clear message and a courageous one, as a matter of fact. Thank you.
Mrs. Tougariu, do you think this points any directions of future European policy or future models of rule of law implementation?
I think that, like I previously mentioned, there is no perfect recipe, obviously, because this is something that takes effort at the level of each member state and the decision makers as well every day. I also think that it is high time, and I'm glad that we have this conference for the future of Europe, that we look at ways of enforcing what we preach. Mm-hmm. Whether we speak about this conditionality mechanism, which is not an easy one, or of rapid ways of acting when we have very complicated situations, or at how to strengthen media freedom, how to make education a field where the union can intervene much more efficiently than it does. We cannot, basically. I mean, this is not an area of competence, direct competence of the union. On how to turn societies into resilient societies who actually know how to react at different levels when we are noticing backsliding and the degradation of values and of democracies and of the rule of law in general, or how to ensure that, for example, the political rotations. If I think about the fact that we have in the political structures people still in their mandates for 10, 15, 20 years now, who have delivered nothing, but how to bring this to the people and explain systematically that this is not healthy for any democracy, no matter who's in power. Well, these are questions to be answered, and also areas where we need to act, not only one side, on all of these areas, policy areas, and also types of decision making as well. And I'm not saying that it's not that it's going to be easy. It is not easy at all. But I would say, I dare to say, that it is a matter of survival at this point. Mm. And it is a matter of survival of the European project as such. Thank you.
That's a very good end, but we still have the time for one more question, and we've got it. It's in the chat from Christian David, so I'll read it aloud. He says, fight against corruption is healthy for each society, both for citizens as for the political class in general. I think that's something we all agree. Mechanism of combating should also not include measures to prevent and correct abuses of justice. How I understand this question in the light of the CVM, the history of CVM mechanisms, can they be improved to prevent and correct, especially abuses of justice? Anyone?
If I may.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I understand the question maybe a bit in a different way, because, for example, in Bulgaria, we have currently a very big debate on so-called specialized courts, which were created 10 years ago with the intention to combat organized crime and corruption. And now the debate is exactly along the lines whether this is not actually abuse of justice, whether this is the role they were entitled to it, or whether they turned into something completely different, if not say the opposite of the intentions. And in that respect, I think the question is very relevant. For example, my personal opinion was since the very beginning of the creation of these specialized courts and moreover prosecutions that they shouldn't have been created in the first place. And now we are in the middle of such a debate. Who knows how it ends? And also, I want to say that to finish on a more positive note, than the current pre-election campaign, for example, in Bulgaria, is completely devoted to the rule of law issues. If not completely, then they dominate the campaign to a large extent. Corruption, rule of law, as I said, the special high courts, which in itself is a very positive thing, because many people really debate, they feel it very close to them, and this is also how it should be, not to raise the debate on the European level, in the European Parliament, but really to have the internal debate. And since we have this debate, I'm very optimistic that it will not be easy, it will be everyday fight, but we'll end up with some positive results. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a question from Angelina Atanasova. She raised a hand, so please.
Hello, thank you very much for the interesting discussion. Angelina Atanasova here, a Constitution Fellow. I'm researching actually civil society, and a few of the speakers actually raised the point that rule of law cannot be really enforced only through top-down approach, and we need a bottom-up approach. We need the engagement of civil society. So my question is actually, how do civil society is impacted by this kind of disappointing, if I may call them, reports coming from the Commission and so on? Because in the past, when it was in the times of the accession period and also later, actually, I find that civil society organizations in Bulgaria would find at supranational level with the Commission and overall more support rather than now. So how actually this kind of the new toolbox actually could support and help civil society to do their job at the bottom, at the grassroots level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just say we've got a few more minutes for more than one answer. So please, anyone for a comment.
May I?
Please do.
Yes.
Yeah.
The civil society has been all along the reporting mechanisms, formal, informal ones, and has been by the side of the European Commission in all of this process. And you have been the ones, the first ones to first of all signal when something went wrong, and then very many of you, those who were the apolitical filters through which the information has passed. This has happened all along. And when we asked for a formal mechanism involving civil society from the side of the Parliament, many of us wanted that. In the evaluation process for the rule of law report, we didn't ask that for nothing. We asked for it precisely for this particular reason. And I still hope that this could be done to some point when we are looking at how to improve the rule of law report, for example, and the mechanisms that we have. I would say that you are essential pillars of this whole process, and I am actually also happy that we finally have the Rights and Values program, and I think this is actually speaking for the interests that the Commission and the European decision makers show to civil society and their involvement. That we are not perfect in doing that, and that a lot more needs to be done. Yes, of course. But I think at least we are aware of the importance that the civil society plays, and the fact that they definitely should be more proactively involved in this process, be it evaluation or rapid mechanisms or the decision recommendations as a whole in what should be done with the rule of law throughout Europe. I personally would like to thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Anyone else? We have a few more minutes for one more comment. Okay, so we are ending just in time then, in 1 hour. Quick reminder that this is a series of 3 events organized by the European Liberal Forum, and the result of this is going to be a publication aimed at the policymakers, it's very important to wrap up what the history of the CVM mechanism have taught us, given the cases of Romania and Bulgaria. Thank you very much. I don't see any more raised hands. So thank you all the viewers and the participants for your time. And I hope we see each other again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.